Hello folks, welcome back. We are now in week 3 of our look at the Pokemon Video Game Players Cup Regional Qualifiers. So far we've gone through the past couple weeks, gone into the winners and losers brackets. Players have been eliminated and we are getting to the point where we're going to be able to start looking at the Players Cup Video Game Finals here soon. So, as we said, we're in week 3 and today we have a pretty good match between Heriberto Pacaje and Javier Parada. And we are in the Latin America losers bracket. This is now in round 10, so pretty far into this tournament. And once again, it's a little more exciting when both players' tournament lives are on the line. So let's go ahead. Let's just jump right in. I'm excited to get into this one. So, all right. So we are watching it from the view of Heriberto Pacaje, and we see Javier leads with Kingdra and Clefairy. So we see that Kingdra from Javier's side. Javier's side, we can probably assume that there is a Politoed in the back there. From Heriberto, we get an Excadrill and a Mungus. Mungus providing good redirection support, can also put that Clefairy to sleep, which is relatively big. But you imagine that Javier is going to either Dynamax the Kingdra or potentially swap the Kingdra out, but that Clefairy is kind of just going to be around to make sure that no harm is done to the Kingdra here. And from Heriberto's side, he is in a pretty good position to use Excadrill, something like an Iron Head, even a Max Steel Spike maybe on the Clefairy to take it out. And a Mungus can pretty safely take almost any hit from a Kingdra outside of maybe like a Max Airstream. But even then, you imagine a Mungus oftentimes has something like a Copa Berry to help mitigate that damage a little bit and make sure that it survives. Here we see the Politoed does come out from Javier's side. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Dynamax from either player here. Heriberto does Dynamax. This will most likely be the Excadrill. You don't normally see a Mungus Dynamaxing. But as we said, a Max Steel Spike here would certainly be big. Excadrill, nice and big here. So something like, once again, Max Steel Spike. Max Quake is an option as Kingdra is a special attacker. But Kingdra actually goes for Protect on Javier's side. This time, instead of Clefairy really providing any support here, Kingdra just goes for the Protect on its own. Politoed comes in, Rain does get set up, and looks like one of these Pokemon is going to be taking a hit from this Excadrill. Imagine it is the Politoed, as we saw. It is a Max Quake and not a Max Steel Spike. As we said, so Heriberto does raise the special defenses of both Pokemon here. That is going to be pretty big against this Kingdra. Politoed, though, does have something like Helping Hand to kind of help limit that damage a little bit. Kingdra usually paired with something like a Life Orb to increase that damage as much as possible. So we'll see what comes out of this. Now the stream here is getting a little bit choppy. I don't think that is from my end. So we'll see how that goes for a little bit longer here. Excadrill, as we saw before, it looks like it's going for that Max Quake again. Raising that special defense right now is kind of the big thing. Max Steel Spike isn't really going to be too much more threatening than a Max Quake right now. Max Quake is doing plenty of damage. Here we see that Helping Hand coming out of Politoed. Kingdra is going to be doing a good amount of damage, but not Dynamaxing. Looks like a Muddy Water here coming out of the Kingdra does a good amount of damage, and a crit on the Amoonguss could be relatively important. Amoonguss is now below half health. It looks like potentially accuracy drop on the Amoonguss as well. Max Quake again coming out of the Excadrill, going to be raising that special defense even more. That first special defense boost definitely helped against this Kingdra, but that Helping Hand from Politoed offset that a little bit. Now Politoed is down. At the very least, Rain is up. Javier has not Dynamaxed yet. And Heriberto does have one more turn of Dynamax. Amoonguss uses Spore on the Kingdra. Big move here. Kingdra going to sleep is certainly dangerous. It's a Pokemon that wants to Dynamax, and if it does not want to be asleep. Here we see Javier actually brings out Urshifu. Looks like it is that single strike style. So something like a Wicked Blow, Close Combat, both moves that Excadrill doesn't exactly want to take. And right now, since there's no Max Steel Spike boosts, Urshifu is in a pretty good spot right now. And but once again, dangerous thing here is Urshifu can't do too much damage to Amoonguss unless it can just outright KO it. And Spore is still certainly dangerous. But as of right now, Heriberto is in a pretty good spot. Kingdra is really the only threat, or Urshifu is really the only threat right now. Kingdra is currently asleep. A one-turn sleep would be big, but it can be pretty safely assume that this Kingdra is going to stay asleep. And we see Heriberto here switches in the Tyranitar, changes the weather. Now this Kingdra is going to be much, much slower, and those Hydro Pumps, or potential Hydro Pumps and Muddy Waters, are not going to be as effective in the sand, especially since this sand gives a special defense boost to both Tyranitar and Excadrill. Here we see Javier Dynamax's Gigantamax's Urshifu, now able to break through all protects, even the max guards, although that might not be too important. Max Knuckles here will be big. G-Max One Blow, also a very strong damaging move. Max Steel Spike now coming out of that Excadrill, boosting the defense. But with how high Urshifu's attack stat is, and with it being super effective damage with this, looks like this is One Blow though. G-Max One Blow doesn't do a ton of damage to Tyranitar here. A good switch in from Heriberto. I'm not even sure that that would have KO'd the Amoonguss. Javier opting to not go for the Max Knuckle, not trying to boost attack stats right now, just trying to get damage out. And Heriberto's Dynamax has run out now, but Excadrill is still a very threatening Pokemon on its own. And we do know that Excadrill right now is the fastest Pokemon on the field. And this Tyranitar could have something like a weakness policy on it. If Excadrill has Bulldoze, that is a phenomenal way to activate it. And then all of a sudden Tyranitar is a terrifying Pokemon to face off against as well. From Javier's side, this Kingdra really needs to wake up, as it can put in so much work against both of the Pokemon that Heriberto has out right now. Urshifu can as well, but it's going to need to start using Max Knuckles. And with this Incineroar in, an Intimidate is not going to be, is definitely going to make things harder for Javier. Of course, a Wicked Blow with a crit is going to be doing a lot of damage if this Urshifu sticks around that long. And this Kingdra switches out. Clefairy comes in. Clefairy, once again, a phenomenal support Pokemon. Likely has Helping Hand as well. We saw how important that Helping Hand was in mitigating the stat buffs on Heriberto's side. And this now is certainly another option for Clefairy to put in some work. Here we see the Max Knuckle coming out, now boosting Urshifu's attack stat. Now it is simply just at neutral though, thanks to the Incineroar's Intimidate. Urshifu slowly getting whittled away here, but this Clefairy is in. It is bulky, and there's not a whole lot that either of Heriberto's Pokemon can do that's going to be doing a ton of damage to the Clefairy, so it's pretty guaranteed that Urshifu is going to be sticking around for at least one more turn here. Incineroar, though, a phenomenal pivot Pokemon. It can certainly switch out using moves like Parting Shot, U-Turn, and Heriberto has a very good... Heriberto has a chance here to cycle through some Intimidates, as this Amoonguss is going to be able to take quite a few hits from this Urshifu. If it is brought in. Tyranitar, of course, a single Max Knuckle is going to be doing so much damage to it. It is definitely threatened by this Urshifu. We see no switches from Heriberto, and now we see a G-Max One Blow coming out of Javier again into the Tyranitar, not bringing it all the way down to 0, bringing it below half health though. This time it was a crit. It did a good chunk of damage. Incineroar now using U-Turn into the Clefairy, does a small amount of chip, but more importantly, it goes back to be brought in later in the game for another Intimidate against this Urshifu. Amoonguss now coming out, and this was Javier's last turn of Dynamax. This Urshifu is going back down to its Babby Formy, and Tyranitar actually has Avalanche. Certainly an interesting move. It does hit both Pokemon, but it doesn't do a ton of damage. Oh, that might have been, I'm sorry, my apologies. That was likely Rock Slide coming out of the Tyranitar, not Avalanche. But Rock Slide here, certainly a good move, but it is moving slower than the Urshifu, which does mean that it's not really going to have the option to get any flinches in. Once again, we have a little bit of lag here on the video. Once again, unfortunately, that does not seem to be coming from my end. But, so, this Clefairy, once again, is definitely a pretty big problem for Heriberto here. This Urshifu could certainly sweep the team. Wicked Blows and Close Combats are definitely dangerous, and Heriberto needs to be getting this Incineroar in and out as much as possible, making safe switches to ensure that it survives. And now this Urshifu can't get any more boosts from Max and Knuckles, so its fighting type attacks aren't going to be able to do quite as much. Intimidate here coming out, certainly good, but Wicked Blows with crits really aren't going to care too much about these stat drops. Clefairy once again using Follow Me. Amoonguss is in a good position here if it does get a Spore off. put the Clefairy to sleep, that will be almost more, that will do quite a bit to make sure that this Urshifu goes down. And here we see the Spore coming out into the Clefairy. It will be going to sleep. So now Urshifu really has to deal with this Amoonguss before it also gets put to sleep. However, this Incineroar, if it does know something like Fake Out, could definitely put this Urshifu into the ground, and this Kingdra would have to come out. Kingdra is still in a decent spot here, but like we said before, it's likely not the fastest Pokemon in the world. So we will see what the turnout is here. Urshifu likely going to still, while it would like to target down the Incineroar slot with a One Blow or a Close Combat Drain Punch, or not Drain Punch, or a Sucker Punch, Javier really is priced into either protecting, as we see here, or taking out the Amoonguss. Javier needs this Clefairy to try to wake up as fast as possible to be able to support Urshifu with Helping Hand, Follow Me, and here we see the Amoonguss going for the Spore, as we saw before. Incineroar not getting an attack off either. Sand does finally disappear, but Heriberto can set it back up with Tyranitar. The one really good thing here for Javier is that Kingdra is still alive and relatively healthy in the back, and it can still do a good chunk of damage. Tyranitar is not the fastest Pokemon in the world, but this Clefairy stays asleep. That's going to be pretty big here. Urshifu going for the One Blow again. We'll see what Pokemon it's targeting. It does take down the Amoonguss, which is pretty big. So now it is Incineroar and Tyranitar up against a Sleep Clefairy and a Sleep Kingdra. And an Urshifu. Flare Blitz comes out. Urshifu goes down. Incineroar is going to get a little bit of recoil, but likely not enough to knock it out. Tyranitar coming in here. We do see it has that weakness policy. And Kingdra will come in as well. Heriberto's probably going to get a couple of turns here where both of Javier's Pokemon are just asleep, because now that sleep counter has reset on the Kingdra since it swapped out. And we see the Sandstream does come back in. One thing that is dangerous is this: if Javier's Pokemon can stick around for a little bit longer, Incineroar could go down to the sand if it uses another Flare Blitz. Instead, we see it going for a U-turn potentially. That's probably its main other damaging move. Clefairy does wake up. Follow Me comes out, just trying to keep Javier's threat alive, as Kingdra does put a good amount of pressure on both Incineroar and Tyranitar. The Kingdra, however, does stay asleep, but we do see that it is faster than both of Heriberto's Pokemon. And we do know this Kingdra has something like Muddy Water, and Heriberto Excadrill is still actually alive. It comes out now. All three of Heriberto's Pokemon are pretty hardly pressured by this Kingdra, and if it can wake up in this next turn or two, it's going to be big. Clefairy takes almost goes down to this rock slide. It's going to be very, very close with the sand. There's a good chance that, and we do know that Excadrill is faster than the Kingdra here. If this Kingdra goes down, well, I mean, Clefairy is about to go down. Kingdra has to wake up now, get a Muddy Water off, survive whatever is coming out of the Excadrill. And Excadrill likely might have something like Sand Rush. It could also have Mold Breaker, and if it does, it would not really care about Follow Me, but it might just try to take out the Clefairy anyways. Looked like Excadrill went for Bulldoze there to try to activate the weakness policy. Kingdra goes so low, and Clefairy does go down. The Follow Me doesn't matter. That was either Bulldoze or Earthquake. Likely an Earthquake with the amount of damage that came out there. We don't see any speed drops. Kingdra does wake up. Muddy Water comes out, but now Kingdra was slowed just a little bit, and that might be enough for Tyranitar or Incineroar to outspeed it. Excadrill falls, but Kingdra goes down to what is either Life Orb Recoil or Sand. And that's it for game one. The main thing there was the Spore from the Amoonguss. That was so huge in making sure that Clefairy and Kingdra were neutralized for a majority of that game. With Clefairy being asleep and Urshifu just having absolutely no support, and the other main attacker that Javier had still asleep, it was Urshifu kind of against the world there. And it did some good damage across the board, but it was not able to take any big knockouts except for that Amoonguss. And Urshifu needed to kind of put in a little bit more work there to really keep Javier in that game. Now, of course, it kind of came down to whether or not that Kingdra woke up after one turn of sleep or not, but that's part of the sport, that's part of the game there. It's almost guaranteed that your opponent will stay asleep for 1 turn. So we just kind of saw how powerful Amoonguss was there. And we also saw the importance of weather control. Politoed coming in, giving Kingdra the speed boost was pretty big, but Tyranitar coming in from the other side, negating the weather and making Kingdra slower than Excadrill was definitely big. And as we saw, kind of those speed tiers were pretty important in that second game. So between Heriberto and Javier, we're going to have to see what adjustments are made. I imagine both players are going to try to switch things up a little bit. Heriberto was very weak to that Urshifu going in game 1. 3 of his Pokemon were very weak to close combats, Max Knuckles, and Amoonguss was really kind of the only stopgap to that. And well, actually, Heriberto was super weak to both Urshifu and Kingdra. So we'll see if Heriberto brings in anything for that. But I imagine out of Javier's side, I'm not entirely sure that I would change too much, except maybe the leads. So let's see what happens in this second game. And we actually see, so Javier actually brings Venusaur here alongside Clefairy. Heriberto brings Amoonguss and Excadrill. So for Heriberto actually brings out pretty much the same lead here, and Javier does change it up. Once again though, Venusaur, a very fast grass-type Pokemon, can do quite a bit of damage to Heriberto's team. Venusaur has options for something like Sleep Powder. It can be Wide Lens support, kind of fulfilling the same role as Amoonguss, but just much, much faster. So Clefairy, and once again another supporting Pokemon. We saw it before, did plenty of work in game 1. Heriberto is kind of in a very good spot against this Venusaur though. Something like an Earthquake from the Excadrill will at least hit neutrally on the Venusaur, as it is Poison type. Here we see Javier Dynamaxing, likely Gigantamaxing the Venusaur here. Gmax Vine Lash with that effect dealing 25% to or 20% to Heriberto's side of each of the Pokemon on Heriberto's field. At the end of every turn is definitely going to be a lot of chip damage, and neither of these Pokemon are going to want to be taking that a lot. Excadrill does use the Protect here. No Dynamax from Heriberto's side this time. Clefairy going for a Protect now. Very defensive play thus far, and here we see that Gmax and Vine Lash, very, very powerful move going into the Excadrill, does about 1/5 to 1/4 of Excadrill's HP there. That Protect coming in pretty big. Spore coming out of the Amoonguss, it can't affect the Venusaur, so going into the Clefairy seems to be the best option. And here we see that very powerful effect from the Gmax Vine Lash onto the Excadrill. However, since Amoonguss is due to Amoonguss's grass typing, it does not take the damage, kind of the one main drawback to these Gigantamax moves that we know the Cantonian starters have, as well as Pokemon like Colossal. And we've seen these effects be very, very powerful in the past. Both Gigantamax Colossal and Gigantamax Charizard have won regionals, and those secondary abilities on the Gmax moves are definitely a big part of those teams. So we'll see how much of an impact Javier's how much of an impact that has on this game. It certainly can be quite a bit. We already see this Excadrill has taken a good chunk of damage even after a Protect. Here we see it looks like a helping hand out of the Clefairy into the Venusaur. We know Venusaur is relatively quick, but Excadrill is faster. Iron Head does come out. Clefairy, though, takes it like an absolute champ despite the fairy typing. Here we see a Max Quake coming out of the Venusaur now. It's going to be raising special defense, but more importantly, it's going to be super effective on this Excadrill, taking this out. But this time, Javier has just kind of left Amoonguss to do its own thing. Wouldn't be surprised to see a Spore into the Clefairy here, taking out the very powerful support Pokemon. Clefairy, we know it almost always carries something like Eviolite, so there's no Lumberry or safety goggles to protect it this time. And this Amoonguss is not taking anything from the Vine Lashes, which definitely puts things, I think that definitely puts things in a little bit of a pickle for Javier. This Amoonguss, like we said, it caused problems last game, and it's untouched, and it's going to continue to cause problems this game. We see Incineroar comes out here. It's not going to be taking any damage from the Vine Lash effect, since it came out after that effect would have happened. The Intimidate here not really doing too much, but we do know that Incineroar often has something like Parting Shot, which can lower special attacks, and Venusaur is not going to like that too much. So we'll see what Amoonguss does here. Amoonguss tends to have some attacking moves. It Venusaur is immune to both of the powder moves that Amoonguss normally has in both Rage Powder and Spore. Amoonguss can often have something like a Sludge Bomb, Giga Drain, or the new move Pollen Puff, all of which are fairly decent against something like Venusaur, particularly Pollen Puff, as Pollen Puff could heal Incineroar if Incineroar gets hit by once again another Max Quake, or just as an attacking move into the Venusaur. Clefairy, though, doubt it's going to be doing much. It remains asleep. Looked like it tried to use either Helping Hand or Follow Me. Amoonguss here does use Rage Powder, though that won't do anything to the Venusaur. We'll see who Javier is attacking here. Max Quake comes out, and it is targeting the Incineroar there. As we said, Rage Powder does not work on grass types. Potentially, Heriberto was thinking that maybe the Clefairy was going to be using a Moonblast or something along those lines, but instead, the Max Quake just comes out right into the Incineroar. That crit here could absolutely matter. Looks like a Snarl is coming out of the Incineroar. Now, special attack drops on both sides, and this will allow Incineroar to stay in currently. But when I say allow, that means it is taking damage from the Vine Lash. So now Heriberto and Javier are in a bit of an interesting standoff spot. We know that Venusaur is faster than Incineroar, as we saw on that last turn. But Amoonguss can't really touch Venusaur right now. Once again, it could use something like Pollen Puff, which would do, a decent amount of damage. But, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Pollen Puff go into the Clefairy to try to take it out. Venusaur Sludge Bomb coming out now into the Incineroar, doesn't quite take it out though. Incineroar gets a chance here to deal some big damage. Flare Blitz coming out, almost takes out the Venusaur. Recoil will take out the Incineroar. Venusaur at just a few hit points left. A Pollen Puff here would absolutely take it out, and that could be dangerous. Spore though coming out, Heriberto learning the futility of powder moves against grass type Pokemon. So here we see this was Javier's answer to the Amoonguss. And we haven't even seen either of the Pokemon in the back for Javier. However, Heriberto does still have two healthy Pokemon. And once this Venusaur goes down, Amoonguss is going to kind of be unlocked. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what Javier does now. Could pretty easily just Giga Drain into the Clefairy, try to take it out. Tyranitar, a very scary Pokemon. Venusaur, though, good chance that it's just going to go down to sand here. Clefairy, though, switches out. Politoed coming in. This time it is Javier's turn to reset the weather, and now this sand is not going to be coming back unless Heriberto Dynamaxes uses Max Rockfall. And keep in mind, we haven't seen the Dynamax from Heriberto yet. So Tyranitar is certainly a scary enough Pokemon, and it could absolutely Dynamax and start doing some damage here. Now, one thing for Javier is that the Giga Drain did go into that Politoed slot, and now its Grass Resistance Berry is gone, but there wasn't really going to be another Grass-type move used against it. So at some point or another, that was basically the move that was going to be used. And now, once again, Amoonguss can go for Rage Powder, can go for Spore, or it can go for Giga Drain, but it's going to be only able to target, really, this Politoed. And this Venusaur, we know it's relatively speedy. It has moves. We know it potentially has something. We know it has an Earth. We know it has a Ground type move. Earth Power here could do some damage to Tyranitar. However, an Earth Power, I don't know if that would be able to take out the Tyranitar, especially if it Dynamaxes. And in that case, it would just trigger the weakness policy. Here we see the Helping Hand. This could just do it. Venusaur is a fairly strong special attacker. Rage Powder, though, coming out of the Amoonguss. Once again, not going to be affecting the Venusaur at all. Looks like here we see a Leaf Storm coming out of Venusaur here. The special attack does fall pretty sharply, but now it is an Amoonguss versus the world. And Amoonguss can't really, once again, as we said before, Amoonguss can't really do much to Venusaur, but a Giga Drain here would absolutely damage it. Heriberto, though, just saying, you know what? Nope. That's it for game 2. Let's head out of here. So absolutely phenomenal play from Javier, absolutely phenomenal adjustment. That Venusaur came in and and as we saw there, it's sometimes people get caught by surprise. That grass typing is so powerful against Spore effects, and Venusaur is a very good answer to Amoonguss specifically for that reason. It is not affected by Rage Powder, and it can't be put to sleep by Spore simply because of its typing. And it can just kind of sit there and it has a partner Pokemon, even especially something like Safety Goggles, or if Clefairy just wants to sit there and be asleep, Amoonguss can't really do anything, and Venusaur just kind of has free reign to wail on that other partner slot, as we saw happen Excadrill went down, Incineroar went down, and then it was really just that Tyranitar that was left. And Heriberto just didn't want to click Giga Drain into the Venusaur, as it would have done a few points of damage, but it just didn't feel like it was going to be worth it to try to take it out all the way. That Politoed switch in from Javier there to gain control of the weather again and keep Venusaur alive was also a pretty huge play, as that gave Venusaur the chance to take down the Tyranitar, and then it was Amoonguss versus the world, and Amoonguss still had to face that Venusaur, as well as whatever Javier still had in the back. So great adjustment. We're definitely going to have to see something different coming out of Heriberto there. Now, of course, something like Excadrill is still going to be relatively scary, but there's going to have to be a bigger threat to Venusaur out front. Flare Blitz from Incineroar, as we saw, does a good chunk of damage, but it's going to have to be able to do a little bit more, or some other chip damage. It's going to have to be able to hit that Venusaur for it to actually take it out. Now, we did see Venusaur didn't take any damage from Life Orb Recoil, so it might be a more defensive item. It might even have Sleep Powder. It might have Wide Lens on it and be kind of a mixed set with kind of that Sleep Powder support plus all the attacking moves, or it could just be very, very offensive. We know it's not a choice item, so figuring that, Heriberto does know what it is, and that definitely could impact his decisions. There's a chance that Heriberto thought, you know what, there is a Wide Lens on there, maybe it's not the very offensive version, but as we saw, Venusaur just kind of tore through Heriberto's team. And really all Javier had to do was bring in Politoed one time. Javier didn't lose a single Pokemon that match. So we'll see what adjustments Heriberto makes. Weather control here I think is going to be very, very huge. And we'll see if there is something that can handle Venusaur in this next game. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So as we saw before, Javier leads with Venusaur and Clefairy, and we see the adjustment from Heriberto bringing in the Incineroar right away. Wants to get Flare Blitz off into the Venusaur, threaten it as soon as possible. And the one interesting thing to note is that Venusaur was doing all that damage even after Snarls, or a Snarl. So this is certainly dangerous. This is still certainly dangerous. Venusaur is still going to be doing a lot of damage, but Flare Blitz will, at the very least, be able to do some stuff here. We see the Snarl trying to come out of Incineroar again, mitigate the special damage. Clefairy using Protect here. No Dynamax from either side right now. And there we see the Sleep Powder coming out of the Venusaur. Very likely, as we said before, we didn't see the Life Orb damage boosting item. We didn't see something like Choice Specs, which would have been crazy enough. That Venusaur was still doing a crazy amount of damage, but that Sleep Powder is going to be big. We kind of saw Heriberto hovering over that fake out option with Incineroar. That might have been a good move, but Javier getting that Sleep Powder off is going to be big. Now Heriberto's kind of way to deal with Venusaur is pretty well managed, and a Max Quake into the Incineroar slot. We don't see any switches here. Is going to be doing so much damage. Here comes the Venusaur. We could also just see a G-Max Vine Lash to go ahead and get that effect set up and doing damage. It definitely was important in that previous game. It brought Incineroar down to very low health. It did so much damage to Excadrill. We see the Helping Hand come out of Clefairy here. This time it is actually Max Ooze though. It does a good chunk to Incineroar, but more importantly, it is going to be raising Venusaur's special attack. So, and now we have kind of all four move slots confirmed. We have Sleep Powder, Sludge Bomb, Leaf Storm, and likely Earth Power out of the Venusaur. Spore comes out into the Clefairy again. Very similar to that first turn, except now Incineroar is also asleep. Venusaur has a special attack, is now at neutral special attack. Or now actually at +1 special attack. That Incineroar didn't even get the Snarl off. And now this Amoonguss once again is just kind of staring down this Venusaur. But Heriberto, a little bit wiser this time, can start putting Giga Drains into Clefairy to get some chip damage off right away. Both Pokemon, or Clefairy does remain asleep, and Venusaur now using that Max Quake at +1 special attack, and Incineroar already weak. Incineroar goes down, doesn't even get a chance to try to wake up. We do know that this Amoonguss though likely going to be, and another crit comes out of Venusaur that actually may have mattered here. Special defense boost on Javier's side, gonna protect from Giga Drains from Amoonguss, and now once again Javier can just kind of sit here and start targeting that partner slot from Amoonguss. Giga Drain comes out, does maybe 10% damage, but And it looks like Heriberto just brought the same Pokemon, is going to have to figure out a way to try to beat this Venusaur with Tyranitar and Excadrill, neither of which are Pokemon that super want to be staring down this big flower frog. Sandstream does come in though, can start getting some extra chip damage on Javier's Pokemon. Any damage here counts. Heriberto going for the Spore just in case Clefairy does wake up. Definitely a smart move here. Want to make sure that that support Pokemon stays asleep at all costs, but also targeting that slot is pretty smart because, as we saw last time, Javier brought in Politoed to reset the weather, but this time Javier just says, you know what, no, I don't even care about the weather this time. And Clefairy stays asleep, and this Spore is not going to be doing any particular damage here. G-Max Vine Lash into the Amoonguss doesn't do a ton of damage, but sets up that continuous damage for the next 4 turns. And this Tyranitar is now under a lot of pressure. Sand coming out, a little bit of chip on all of the Pokemon except for Tyranitar. However, Tyranitar gets more, definitely takes the brunt of it here from the G-Max Vine Lash. Venusaur coming back down, Javier smartly using that last turn to set up the very powerful continuous damage effect. And now I think it's pretty safe guarantee that Clefairy will wake up here. And last time we saw Javier just go straight into this Tyranitar with something like a Leaf Storm here. Politoed now coming in though, wanting to reset the weather now. And this does take away that special defense buff from the sand that Tyranitar normally gets. Heriberto didn't get a chance to Dynamax last game, but saying, alright Tyranitar, now's your time to shine. Tyranitar can now reset the sand with something like a Max Rockfall. And once that gets set up, it's certainly going to be dangerous, but it's going to have to take a hit from this Venusaur first, which it most certainly does not want to be doing. Amoonguss not going to be able to move faster than either of Javier's Pokemon, but Politoed just switching in a Spore. If Heriberto called it again, Spore here would certainly be good. Tyranitar does actually outspeed the Venusaur here. Max Rockfall dealing about 50%, and the sand does change, so now... Wait, Venusaur actually goes down to that. My apologies, the lag making my screen not the clearest thing in the world. Spore coming out. Phenomenal turn for Heriberto here. Venusaur going down is absolutely huge, and now Politoed is asleep. We know the Clefairy is still asleep. I imagine that the last thing in the back is a Kingdra, but there is no rain to boost its speed. Heriberto in a pretty good spot here. 2 of Javier's Pokemon are asleep. Heriberto has 2 more turns of Dynamax. Sand is up, and Javier's Weather Setter isn't in the back. We'll see what happens here. There's a chance Javier brings out Clefairy and just tries to tank the hits from this Tyranitar, which is, it's a terrifying Pokemon to be staring down, especially when the next time you hit it with, you know, something like a Scald, Weakness Policy is just going to trigger, and it's going to make it even scarier. Clefairy does come out here, and these are both Pokemon are asleep for Javier, and this Tyranitar just gets a chance to start wrecking havoc. And Amoonguss here does also get the chance. There are no more special defense boosts on Javier's side, and but Heriberto does know that the Politoed has a berry. Now wouldn't be a bad time to try to get that berry off of Politoed, but Heriberto is actually saying, you know what, let's trigger my Weakness Policy, and maybe we can just sweep up the rest of Javier's team here. Could certainly happen, especially with both of these Pokemon asleep. From Javier's side, I think, yeah, you have to get that rain back in. I think you bring out the Kingdra is smart. Clefairy is kind of both the least and the most important Pokemon, and it does wake up and Follow Me comes out. That's pretty much exactly what Javier needed. But as we saw, it looked like Heriberto was targeting the Clefairy anyways. This is going to be a good chunk of damage. It looks like the Clefairy does manage to stick around, and it'll probably stick around even through sand, but the Giga Drain comes out into the Clefairy. As I said before, Heriberto does have an option to target Tyranitar with that Giga Drain and trigger the Weakness Policy. But however, that's not going to be happening on this turn. Politoed now coming back out, and Kingdra, for at least one turn, is going to get a chance to move before this Tyranitar. Now, we know Javier's Kingdra has Muddy Water. Normally, we do only see one water move on Kingdra. It could very well be a set like Muddy Water, Hurricane, Draco Meteor, or it could be something like Muddy Water, Hurricane, Draco Meteor. It potentially has Protect, but the big thing here is if this Kingdra has Hydro Pump. If it has Hydro Pump, Tyranitar is a very, very bulky Pokemon, and in Dynamax, its defenses are even stronger. But if Politoed can wake up here, helping hand the Kingdra, Kingdra is currently very, very fast with that Swift Swim ability, and a Rain boosted, helping hand boosted Hydro Pump just might be able to take this Tyranitar down and swing things a little bit more in Javier's favor by keeping that Rain up. Kingdra actually going for the Protect, banking on the fact that Politoed might not wake up here. Amoonguss using Rage Powder, not wanting to let Tyranitar go down to a very strong Hyper Beam. Politoed, though, staying asleep. And here we see that Max Rockfall coming back out to set the sand up again. Kingdra takes a little bit of damage here. This is likely putting it in range of something like a... Well, this was Tyranitar's last turn of Dynamax, I believe. And in that case, it might not be in range of a sand-boosted Rock Slide. Or, well, it might not be in range of a Rock Slide from Tyranitar or even a Lash Out. But it is certainly it's certainly not in a great place. Now it is much, much slower. And its Water-type stab moves are not going to be boosted. From Javier's side, you have to imagine that something like a Helping Hand Muddy Water is going to be the way out of this. It could do a good amount of damage to Tyranitar. When we see the Muddy Water coming out here, Tyranitar not in Dynamax form is going to take a lot from this, but it doesn't go down, which is huge because now the weakness policy is triggered. Evasion does get decreased, but if Tyranitar chose something like Lash Out, now Lash Out is going to be boosted not only by weakness policy, but I believe it is also going to be boosted by that accuracy drop. So if this Tyranitar can miss the Lash Out, that is going to be huge. Or it actually, the Rock Slide comes out here, and both of Javier's Pokemon dodge it. Spore, though, coming out from the Amoonguss puts the Kingdra to sleep. Javier, once again, both Pokemon asleep. Heriberto, though, Tyranitar weakness policy is triggered, but that Rock Slide miss is huge. Very likely facilitated by the accuracy drop from Muddy Water. Heriberto still feels like Heriberto is in a very commanding lead in this game, as Tyranitar is still able to do a ton of damage, and there's still whatever Heriberto has in the back, which likely is just Excadrill. And Excadrill is faster than both of Javier's Pokemon, and Earthquake here is going to be doing a ton of damage. Kingdra stays asleep, but Politoed does wake up. Politoed is a little bit faster. Ice Beam comes out, does a good chunk of damage to Amoonguss, but doesn't take it out. Both of Heriberto's Pokemon are super weak, but Rock Slide comes out. Looks like it connects with both Pokemon here. And that weakness policy boost definitely coming in big. Kingdra going down. It's a Politoed against the world now. Sand slowly chipping away at it. And all Heriberto really has to do now is protect a couple times, and everything is good to go. This Giga Drain here could absolutely finish it off. Politoed not in a great position, most certainly. I think potentially a Scald on the Tyranitar would have been the better way to go about this. Making sure that there wasn't much of a... Whoop, let's get back here. I think, yeah, the best way I think to go about that here was taking out that Tyranitar on the last turn. It is most certainly a threat. I think Javier, though, was kind of banking on, all right, this Amoonguss has to get out of here if I want to make sure that I can just be awake to finish this battle. So I can definitely understand that play. And it was kind of Rock Slide hitting both Pokemon there. It had to be very, very low chances, especially with the accuracy drop from Muddy Water. Kingdra staying asleep there was pretty rough, but we did see the power of Amoonguss in those games, particularly game 1 and game 2. The adjustment from Javier in the second game was absolutely phenomenal. The Venusaur was kind of able to sweep through the team, but hold on. Whoop. But Heriberto's Tyranitar was really able to do just so much damage to that Venusaur once the Dynamax. And I think that was kind of the key difference between games 2 and 3, where Heriberto just didn't Dynamax, I don't think, at all in that second game, and that was kind of the downfall. Because Tyranitar, as we saw before, it is such a powerful Pokemon. I think even Excadrill would have been able to do it. And once again, that weather war between Sand and Rain was definitely big, making sure that Kingdra was much slower, that Tyranitar's special defense was boosted so that it survived stuff like Muddy Waters was huge. Fantastic. This was actually a fantastic set. I think definitely one of my favorites from this entire tournament so far. We got to see so many different aspects of VGC. Particularly, we saw the boosts, like the special defense boosts from the Dynamax moves coming in huge, with Excadrills, Max Quakes being very, very important, as well as Venusaur's. We saw Venusaur's G-Max Vine Lash and that chip damage coming in very big. We saw the weather wars between Politoed and Tyranitar and the Max moves being absolutely clutch in that third game. And we got to see some phenomenal adjustments from both players. Heriberto led that third game with Incineroar, knowing full well that it was going to put pressure on Venusaur and force it to either switch out or answer it in some other way that wasn't necessarily with damage. And as we saw before, it wasn't quite able to take out the Incineroar on that with that first Earth Power or Max Quake. And so it needed to deal with it some other way, or else it would take a Flare Blitz. And that Sleep Powder came out, but that gave Heriberto a turn to Spore the Clefairy, mitigate any, or that gave Heriberto a chance to maneuver some other things around with Amoonguss. The Clefairy had already used its Protect. Amoonguss got to use that Spore on the second turn, put Clefairy to sleep right away. And this time Heriberto knew Rage Powder wasn't going to be doing anything to redirect the Venusaur there. So we also got to see kind of the information gain, the information pickup from that second game used in the third game from Heriberto. Absolutely phenomenal play from both players. Even though we saw Heriberto actually brought the same 4 Pokemon to all 3 games, but kind of varied up the leads to give himself a little bit of a better opportunity. In Game 3, we didn't even see Excadrill, and it was such a key player in that first game, but just Javier bringing the Venusaur completely changed the dynamic, and we had a very different Game 2 and Game 3 as well. So, thank you all very much for watching. Come back next time for the next battle in Week 3 as we continue looking at this. Be safe, be smart, make wise decisions. Farewell.